Yes, dear viewer, you read that title right. I got COVID from what I'm pretty sure was an Omicron infection. A little bit of background. I'm 42 years old and I live in Los Angeles. I have no comorbidities and I'm in the best shape of my life. I've had 3 doses of the Pfizer vaccine, the third of which was at the beginning of October. And I've been using rapid antigen tests as a way to safely meet with other people since they became commercially available in the US last spring. My typical schedule for testing is Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday, 3 times a week, but I'll add testing for specific social engagements as needed. I live in a fairly large 3-bedroom, 2-bath apartment with my wife Penny, and I was scheduled to fly to Chicago for my nephew Shim's bar mitzvah on January 7th. My COVID story begins on Thursday night, December 23rd. Having tested negative on my usual Monday and Wednesday tests, I start feeling something in my throat that evening. It's very subtle, and at first I assume it's just the dry air. The weather in LA has been getting progressively colder over the past month, and our heating system is HVAC based. And I literally haven't been sick since January of 2019, so I assume that that's all it is. Still, I know that the numbers in LA are rising, and I decide out of an abundance of caution to increase the frequency with which I test the 12-hour intervals. So Thursday night, I test and the result is negative, but the sore throat isn't going away, and I noticed that the same lymph node that had been tender for the weeks following doses 2 and 3 of the vaccine is tender again. I'm worried enough that I don't sleep very well, and I place an order for some Honeywell N95 respirators on Amazon. When I wake up Friday morning, my scratchy throat is now climbing up to my nose. I take a rapid test, which comes up negative, and I set up a humidifier in the bedroom, still hoping against hope that this isn't COVID. In the evening, I start feeling muscle aches. It's difficult to describe the sensation, but imagine a tightness that causes your limbs to keep locking up in unnatural positions. I take another rapid test Friday night, which also comes up negative. The humidifier helps with the throat, but I go to sleep knowing that something just isn't quite right. I wake up Saturday morning having drenched my pajamas in sweat. I immediately take another rapid test, and for the first time since I started swabbing my nose with these tests 7 months ago, I see a very faint and incomplete second line on the little white test strip. The N95 masks that I ordered haven't arrived yet, so I immediately put on the best mask that I have access to, which is my Halo mask. My wife wakes up and sees me in my mask, and we make a series of quick but important decisions. She puts on her Halo mask and will stay masked 24/7. We open all the windows, turn the heat up, and strategically place the HEPA air purifiers that we bought for fire season at the entrance to the rooms that we'll be staying in. I keep to the rear of the apartment, mainly in the bedroom and my study, and my wife has the front of the apartment. We each take one bathroom. Penny prepares food and drink for me and drops it off in the hallway near the bedroom. I stay masked unless I'm sleeping, eating, or drinking, and we communicate through FaceTime. I begin to monitor my blood oxygen levels on the Apple Watch, and I place an order on Amazon for one of those finger sensors because I want a more accurate monitor so that I can know whether or not I need to go to the hospital. Next, I try to remember every person that I had social contact with throughout the week, and I contact them individually to let them know that I tested positive. I also decide against getting a PCR test until I test negative on the rapids. My thinking is that knowing that I'm shedding enough virus to turn an antigen test positive, I don't want to risk infecting anyone on my way to or from the test site. I figure I'll sort out getting my case reported once I test negative on 2 rapid tests 12 hours apart. My symptoms at this point are a sore throat and scratchy upper airways, a very occasional cough, and loose bowels. I do a second test Saturday night, which is much more definitively positive, and I decide to end the 12-hour interval and just test in the mornings. Over the next few days, my symptoms become dramatically milder, but I do lose taste and smell, and this scares me. I personally know COVID survivors who lost their smell for months, or even in a few cases, more than a year. My morning rapid tests are now so emphatically positive that the sample line looks closer to black than pink. At this point, I'm wondering how long it'll take me to clear the virus. Thankfully, throughout this early phase of my infection, Penny continues to test negative, and my blood oxygen never dips below 95. And then, as cases are starting to spike in major population centers all over the US,
Tonight, a sea change in policy from the CDC, cutting the recommended quarantine time in half for all Americans infected with COVID-19. From 10 days down to 5, provided they're asymptomatic and wear masks around others for 5 more days.
The CDC reduces its isolation recommendation to 5 days after symptom onset without a testing requirement if symptoms are resolving. My symptoms were arguably resolving at this point, except for the loss of taste and smell, which are the 2 symptoms that are explicitly excluded from this new and revised guidance. So according to the CDC, I should be okay to end my isolation tomorrow. I'm feeling almost back to normal, but my rapid tests are telling a very different story.
Here, there's no testing requirement, and if someone says, I have COVID and I just popped a positive test on day 6, you're telling me I can go into the office?
If you look at the predictive capability of a test to say whether or not you are infective is much, much more weighted towards the earlier first 5 days.
I would bet 30% of people at day 5 post-symptoms, especially with Omicron because symptoms have shifted forward, are still infectious. They're still potentially highly infectious at day 5, and I do hope that the CDC walks it back.
The best study to date on the subject of infectiousness would come out a week later and validate what many infectious disease experts were saying at the time, that most people are still infectious 5 days post-symptom onset. After a few days, I feel deep relief as my sense of smell starts coming back in the afternoon. My symptoms are basically gone at this point, but I'm still testing positive on my morning rapids. As my isolation stretches on, I'm now starting to wonder whether or not I'll manage to turn 2 rapid tests negative in time to make it to my nephew Shim's bar mitzvah in Chicago. While the morning tests are now taking longer to turn positive and are not quite so dark, they're definitely still positive. And now a new set of symptoms have come on the scene. I'm waking up with congestion, a runny nose, and sinus headaches. On Monday, I test positive, but the line is a lot fainter than it had been. My taste and smell are now returning earlier in the day. Rochelle Walensky at the CDC is quoted as defending the new isolation policy, saying that rapid tests are not reliable for determining when an individual is no longer contagious. The CDC facing intense backlash from the public health community over this and their revised isolation policy.
Again tweaking its recommendations as the Omicron variant sweeps across the country. Last week it cut its isolation recommendation from 10 days to 5 days. Now it says if you can get a rapid test after 5 days of isolation and it's positive, you should isolate for 5 more days. If it's negative, you should wear a mask for 5 more days.
What we heard over the last week is many people were interested in using an antigen test. They had access to the antigen test. So we did not pivot our recommendations. What we did is we provided guidance for how you'd use and interpret that antigen test if you so chose to take the extra step to get one.
The entire internet now understands what a messaging disaster this has become and starts mocking the CDC for it. I'm on day 12 and still turning rapid tests positive. On Wednesday morning, the sample line is so faint that it's barely visible. I start investigating where Penny and I can get a PCR test. I assume that I'll test positive, and that'll be how my case gets reported. And if Penny comes up negative, we'll know that she didn't get it. There's some disturbing price gouging going on at test sites all over LA, and it's difficult to get an appointment at all. I managed to nab a free PCR test with Project Baseline, but the earliest available appointment is Thursday, January 13th, next week. As my flight to Chicago is scheduled for Thursday afternoon, if I turn a rapid positive tonight on Wednesday, I won't have enough time to get 2 negatives 12 hours apart before my flight. A preprint has come out suggesting that Omicron shows up first in the saliva, and some, including infectious disease expert Michael Mina, start swabbing their throats in addition to swabbing their nostrils when sampling for a rapid test, in the hopes of improving the test's sensitivity for that early phase of infection. Curious, I take my first and only throat swab in the evening, alongside a separate test with the ordinary nose swab. It's hard to get the throat with the stick that comes with the Binax Now kits, but I do it and it's negative. I decide against doing any more throat swabs, as the tests haven't been validated for this kind of collection, and the last thing that I want at this point is a false positive. My ordinary nose swab rapid test turns up faintly positive. I cancel my trip to Chicago and tell my family, who are disappointed but understand. Over the next 3 days, my rapid tests would show a little comeback of the virus. Nothing dramatic, but the line does get darker again before it finally goes away. On Saturday night, I get my first negative, and then on Sunday morning, day 17, with congestion, carotid pain, and sinus headaches, I finally get my second negative test. I end my isolation and begin the process of cleaning the apartment. Over the next few days, I'll notice my left bicep twitching uncontrollably, a return of the muscle aches, and burning eyes. These symptoms will linger for about a week before they go away. On Thursday, I test negative for a third time, and Penny and I go for our Project Baseline PCR tests. Both tests come back negative, meaning that Penny keeps her perfect record of negative COVID tests. I want to end this video with a simple ask that I hope will also serve as a reminder to self, because this is definitely something that I need to hear from time to time. As you navigate the pandemic going forward, try to find a little bit more compassion for people, from the public health officials who are working with insufficient data in an ever-changing landscape to your friends and family who might be making what you consider to be the wrong decisions. Just find that extra little bit of compassion. We're in a war with this virus, and I still believe that we can win that war, but if we lose each other in the process, well, that's not really winning, is it?